purpose of inquiring about next week's schedule.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
I thank the Speaker, and I yield to my good friend and gentleman from Atlanta, Georgia, for the purpose of announcing next week's schedule.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my friend and my colleague for yielding. I must tell my friend, the gentleman from California, that on Monday the House will meet at 12:30 p.m. for morning hour debate and 2 p.m. for legislative business. On Tuesday, the House will meet at 10:30 a.m. for morning hour debate and 12 p.m. for legislative business. On Wednesday and Thursday, the House will meet at 10 a.m. for legislative business. On Friday, no votes are expected in the House. We will consider several bills under suspension of the rule. The complete list of suspension bills will be announced by the close of business tomorrow. In addition, we will consider H.R. 1728, the Mortgage Reform and Anti-Predatory Lending Act, and the Fight Fraud Act of 2009.
Reclaiming my time, if I may ask my colleague, knowing that Congress is in session only for 3 more weeks before we break for Memorial Day, and having just heard next week's schedule, I wonder if my colleague might elaborate on the last 2 weeks in May, what we would be expecting in the House. And I yield to my gentleman.
Well, I want to thank my friend for yielding. You know by now that we've had a very busy agenda during this work period, including the bills we have already completed. National Water Research and Development Initiative Act, the credit card legislation, hate crimes legislation, the budget conference report, and next week we expect to pass Mortgage Reform and Anti-Predatory Lending Act, Fight Fraud Act of 2009. I must tell you that in addition, before the Memorial Day break, we will need to pass the supplemental appropriation for Iraq and Afghanistan. The President sent his request on April 10th for more than $83 billion. We expect the House and Senate to act on the request before the Memorial Day recess.
Reclaiming my time, if I may elaborate with the gentleman from Georgia, you said a war supplemental. I would wonder, would there be any benchmarks in this bill, and would there be any non-war related spending in this bill as well? And I yield to my
I must tell my friend again that we have not discussed with the majority leader, with others in our leadership, but right now it is our intention to pass a bill that includes the 2 wars.
Reclaiming my time, if I may further ask, so is it your intention to put any non-war spending in this supplemental bill? And I yield.
The chair of the Appropriation Committee have informed us that he expects to mark up the bill next week, and we will make that information available at that time.
Reclaiming my time, if I could just further, so is it your intention, the majority's, not to have any non-war funding inside the supplemental bill?
I cannot, I must repeat, I cannot make a commitment within the certainty. Only thing that I can say right now, at this moment, things could change, but at this moment, we plan to have the 2 wars in the bill.
And then if I could just, reclaim my time, if I could just clarify one last time. Do you envision having benchmarks in this supplemental bill, knowing that in the past term, the desire of the majority to have benchmarks and
we have not
the President
had any discussion.
I yield.
Thank you for yielding again, my friend. We have not had any discussion about benchmarks in the bill. We will wait to see the chair of the Appropriation Committee, Mr. Obey, and his members.
Well, I thank the gentleman. Reclaiming my time. Knowing the debate that we had a week ago with all the hearings in Energy and Commerce, and knowing what the schedule said that this week would be the markup of the cap and trade bill, but this week being canceled in the markup, does the gentleman seeing Energy and Commerce bringing up cap and trade, or that coming to the floor within the next 3 weeks before we go on recess? And I yield to the gentleman from Georgia.
We looking down the road, and we will be working on energy and climate change. These bills are not on the agenda for this work period. but we would like to see them on the floor in the near future.
If I could just maybe clarify, so in the next 3 weeks, do you not see Energy and Commerce taking up or bringing to the floor a cap-and-trade bill? And I yield to the gentleman.
That is correct, my friend.
If I may just further another question of inquiry to my friend from Atlanta, the card check bill has been out there for quite some time, knowing the number of co-sponsors on the majority side. Do you envision that coming up anytime in the near future? And I yield.
We do not expect to see it coming up anytime within the next a few weeks.
Does the gentleman believe that the card check bill would come to the House before it moves in the Senate, or do you envision it moving in the Senate first? And I yield.
Thank you, my friend, for raising the question. I must tell you that we cannot make any type of commitment there. We're working on it, and we're going to continue to work, and we hope to work with you and others in a bipartisan fashion before we act.
Reclaiming my time, and I appreciate you bringing up bipartisanship. And you know, yesterday was the 100 days of our new president, and one of our big goals together was to work in a bipartisan and forge that effort. And as everybody knows in this House, unfortunately, that did not take place, and it is regrettable. But Republicans on this side want to make sure that we do forge in a bipartisan manner, and I'd like to bring up a few items that we could work together on. I will tell you, when I was very proud at the very beginning of this session when we, the minority, the Republicans, invited the President to our conference, and we actually had a very good discussion about the stimulus bill. It was unfortunate that a bill was introduced while he was talking to us and not able to be bipartisan in that nature. But I was wondering on a couple items that we could work closely together. Recently, the President came forward and asked his cabinet to find $100 million in waste and abuse and duplication. And this is a place that I know we can all work together. I know our leadership, Mr. Boehner and Mr. Cantor, personally talked to the President. The President asked us to produce a list. I would ask our good friend from Georgia if he was wondering if the House Democrats would be willing to work with the Republicans, bring something to the floor before this May recess where we could eliminate waste, fraud, and duplication and actually save the taxpayers in America. And I yield back.
Well, I want to thank my friend again for yielding. If you turn the pages of the past few days and the past few weeks, I think we have a record of bipartisanship. First, I'm happy to remind my friend that we have passed a number of bills recently with bipartisan support, including the National Water Research and Development Initiative Act. The vote was 410 to 13. Today, we passed the credit card legislation 357 to 70, and the Mortgage Reform and Anti-Predatory Lending Act, which we expect on the floor next week, passed out of the committee on a bipartisan vote of 49 to 21, with 8 Republicans supporting. So I said to you, my friend, I hope there are more and many more opportunities in the future to continue to build on our record of bipartisanship. And I look forward to working with you to find opportunities to do much more. We want to work with the President. We want to work with you to cut waste.
Well, reclaiming my time, I appreciate that. And when I look at bipartisanship to the House and I look at the biggest bills that have been transferred through this House in such a short amount of time, that would, just yesterday on the 100-day anniversary on the budget, that would double the debt in less than 5 years and triple it in 10. The bipartisan vote, unfortunately, was a number of Democrats, 17, joining with all the Republicans and saying there was a better way and no. And I think the American people would like to see another version, such as when you saw the stimulus bill. Unfortunately, the bipartisanship was a direction that we wanted to have another way to go. It's unfortunate that you would find only one party voting yes when you had both parties saying no. So in areas that I think we can really come together, where the President had laid out that he wants to find ways that we can eliminate waste, duplication, we have our hand out. We want to work with you. And so I just ask you one more time, is there an opportunity, and I know you've talked about bipartisanship, is there a way We'll provide a list to the President. We'll provide a list to you as well. Could we bring that to the floor within the next 3 weeks before we go on Memorial Day recess and show the American people that we're very serious about eliminating waste, fraud, and duplication? I yield to the gentleman.
I think our leadership and the chairs of our committees are prepared and ready to work with your side and to work with the President in finding a way to cut waste. I must say to you, my friend, while $100 million may be only a small fraction of the overall federal budget, I remind you that it is $100 million more than the previous administration cut in 8 years with the help of the Republican-controlled Congress. In fact, under Republicans, we went from a surplus of $5.6 trillion to a deficit of $4.5 trillion, a turnaround of almost $10 trillion. So we're going to work with you. We are prepared to do what we can to work in a bipartisan fashion to cut waste and to save the taxpayers' money.
Well, reclaim my time. I thank the gentleman, and I will tell you, $100 million, when I look at the budget being passed, and in a few short years, I think of my children and America paying $1 billion in interest a day. I know the American people care much about their children as I care about mine, and we do not want that to continue. So I look forward. I take your hand being out to us in bipartisanship, and I look forward to working with you that we can eliminate waste. I look forward that we come together with this President, bring to the floor before Memorial Day. I think there's a way we can reach for greatness. There's a way that we can come together. Another area that I think we can work well together on is trade. House Republicans stand ready to work with this President. This President has signaled his desire to have a vote on the Panama Trade Agreement and to begin moving forward with the Colombia Free Trade. I even know the leadership on the majority side, the majority leader, Steny Hoyer, during the last recess, he traveled to Panama. He traveled to Colombia. So my question to the House Democrats, would there be an opportunity to have a vote before the July 4th recess on the Panama Trade Agreement that the President asked to have? I yield.
Well, I want to thank my friend for yielding. I'm so glad and pleased that you're raising the issue of trade agreements. It is an issue that Democrats and Republicans have a history and a long and rich and glorious history of working together. And we will work together. I know that the majority leader, Mr. Hoyer, is very focused on the issue of trade, the Panama FTA, and that he is working with the administration and with members on your side of the aisle, including Mr. Kirk and your leadership, to get this trade agreement done in a timely manner. I promise you that, and I know if Mr. Hoyer was standing here, he would make the same promise.
Reclaiming my time, I thank the gentleman, because when I sit back and I think of the time of the President going to Peoria, going to Caterpillar, and I listen to those individuals that work there, and I listen to their representative, Congressman Aaron Schock, when he sat there and talked to them, and they said the number of tractors they would sell, that the actual tariffs would be brought down automatically as soon as these trade agreements go forward. That when you think of America where we continue to lose jobs, and we're thinking about how job creation and small business, these trade agreements are nothing but a benefit to America. We want to work with you. And I just ask the gentleman, I appreciate his willingness to work with us, but could we do this by July 4th? The President has signaled that he would like that done. Does the gentleman believe we can have it done by July 4th? And I yield.
I cannot thank the gentleman for yielding. I cannot assure you, cannot guarantee you that we will have it done by July the 4th. But I will assure you that we're going to work together as a member of the Ways and Means Committee, and I'm sure the chair of our subcommittee, Mr. Levin, I'm going to work with the ranking member and others, the full committee chair and the full ranking member to get it done as soon as possible, but hopefully in a timely fashion.
Well, reclaiming my time, I was very hopeful in the last term that we could have got these done, knowing that the recession that we moved into and the number of jobs that are being laid off, even in my own state, knowing the double-digit unemployment, that anything we can do, especially when it's been sitting on the table, been negotiating, and it's a positive agreement for America, a job creation, that we should come together. The President has signaled. The Republicans are saying, we're there. We want to help him. We want to pass this. We're asking the majority party to join with us. And
Well,
I would just yield for a final comment from the gentleman.
we all must work together in a timely fashion to save the jobs, create more jobs, and put all of our people back to work.
Reclaiming my time, you know, we just wrapped up 100 days. And I think America is going to look to what does America look like 100 days from now, 200 more days, 300 more days. Today we talked about numerous different bills, from trade agreements that create jobs, from eliminating waste, lowering the deficit. Those are areas that we stand ready to work with this President and work with this majority party. So I thank you for the time that you spent. I thank you for your answers, and I yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Speaker.
Purpose does the gentleman from Georgia rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn to meet at 12:30 p.m. on Monday next for morning hour debate.
Without objection, so ordered. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the clerk be authorized to make technical correction in engrossment 627 to include correction in spelling, punctuation, section numbering, and cross-reference and insertion of appropriate headings.
Without objection, so ordered. The chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. The chair lays before the House the following personal requests.
Leave of absence for Mr. Stark of California for today.
Without objection, the request is granted. For what purpose does the gentleman from Kansas rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that today, following legislative business and any special orders heretofore entered into, the following members may be permitted to address the House, revise and extend their remarks, and include therein extraneous material. Mr. T. from Kansas today for 5 minutes. Mr. Poe for today, or May 7th, for 5 minutes. Mr. Jones, May 7th for 5 minutes. Mr. Burton, May 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th for 5 minutes each. Mrs. Miller today.